Good afternoon and welcome to the Center for Law and the Human Person's second annual Spring Symposium. Just a brief note that we will have students coming in and out throughout the afternoon because of their school, their class schedule. So don't be perturbed if you see someone, if you're a speaker and you see someone storm out. It's nothing personal, right? It's just that they're late for class. Professor DiGirolamo and I have a few welcoming remarks before we start our program. It has been a great privilege and joy for me to direct the center over these last several years and to see traditions forming like this spring symposium and to see friendships forging, especially across disciplines and across schools through our shared concerns and commitments. I am also delighted that this January, as many of you know, that I was joined by my new colleague, Mark DiGirolamo, who some of you will remember as one of our speakers from last year's conference, who is the law school's St. John Henry Newman Professor of Law and now co-director of the center. So he will share his own welcoming remarks in a moment. The mission of the center can be boiled down to this: to bring together an interdisciplinary community of students, scholars, and practitioners who aspire to explore law in light of the truth of the human person and within the distinctive and rich Catholic intellectual tradition. Last year's inaugural conference, so this is an occasion for me to sort of share and admire our beautiful artwork that I hope will become sort of part of the brand of center advertising. Last year's inaugural conference, Rightly Ordered Law and the Flourishing of the Human Person, addressed these central concerns directly, especially in the keynote offered by Notre Dame's Carter Snead on anthropology, the indispensable tool for grasping and shaping law, as well as the presentation by Mark on notes on a new humanism in legal education. So in this academic year, 23-24, we dedicated our programming to the theme of freedom and truth, the name of today's symposium. And it was our hope throughout the year to engage the contemporary and we think deficient understanding of human liberty on offer, especially in the law, and to offer a corrective, one that honors not just man's capacity for choice, but acknowledges that the proper end of liberty is to choose the good. One that seeks not radical liberation from external authority, but rather one that recognizes and even delights in the fundamental dependence of freedom on truth. So I just want to give you a little retrospective of this past year, some of the highlights of our programming from this past academic year leading up to today's program. So last October, Father Aquinas Gilbo, the university's chaplain and vice president of ministry and mission, gave a lecture entitled, "What is Freedom For? A Reminder from Veritatis Splendor on its 30th anniversary." And in that lecture, Father Aquinas reflected on law's quality as a mediator between truth and freedom. And in reflecting on Pope John Paul's magnificent encyclical letter, Veritatis Splendor, he offered what I think might be one of the most elegant articulations of what law is and its relation to liberty. So this is a quote from his lecture. On the one hand, law observes the natures of things and gathers from them a wisdom for living. This is the contemplative quality of law. Law observes and takes its direction from how things are. In this way, law obeys reality. Law serves truth. On the other hand, law gathers what it learns from how things are and translates that knowledge into precepts that coordinate the activity of a people, whose coordination aims at freeing persons from any number of obstacles that prevent their participation in the common good. In this way, law promotes freedom. Law serves freedom by ensuring the social and political conditions necessary for persons to live according to right reason. Next, earlier this semester, in February, we hosted Professor Daniel Mahoney of Assumption University, who gave a lecture entitled Freedom, Moral Purpose, and Self-Limitation, The Enduring Wisdom of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And Mahoney described Solzhenitsyn's enduring legacy as a sort of fearless champion of the truth, obviously within the context especially of his opposition to the Soviet Union's totalitarian regime. But again, he drew out these kind of more fundamental themes related to freedom and truth that apply in every context. So, for example, he made the point in his lecture that mere exterior freedom, however important, can quickly degenerate into something ugly and unworthy of the human person if not directed to its proper end. So for Solzhenitsyn, Professor Mahoney said, freedom always needs to be accompanied by repentance, by moral self-knowledge, and by voluntary self-limitation if it is to be conducive of something truly worthy. Finally, in terms of our activities, another thing I want to highlight for you is that as part of our Center's Ex Corde Fellowship, which we operate in conjunction with the Project on Constitutional Originalism and the Catholic Intellectual Tradition. Kevin Walsh here is a co-director of that program. And together we run a fellowship program for students. And one of the activities of that program is a reading group entitled Tolle et Lege. And the phrase, which is Latin for take up and read, is taken from chapter 8. You might recognize it from chapter 8 of St. Augustine's Confessions, and it evokes this transformative power of text. So in his case, an encounter with Scripture that was critical to the final moments of his conversion. And so it's our hope that in gathering together to discuss texts, classic texts, especially in the Catholic but also Christian intellectual tradition, from a variety of disciplines, that we will experience that same sort of conversion in the pursuit of truth and in the company of friends that so marked the life of St. Augustine. And so this year, some of the texts that we read were in the fall major excerpts from John Paul's encyclical Veritatis Splendor to prepare for Father Aquinas' lecture, 2 essays of Alexander Solzhenitsyn to prepare for Professor Mahoney's lecture. And then finally, just a week or so ago, we read together C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce. So that delightful thought experiment of the bus ride to heaven, illustrating quite powerfully man's capacity to choose and the consequences of that. So against the backdrop of these wonderful and insightful explorations of the relationship between freedom and truth, right, I'm eager to hear the 3 speakers today to continue to engage this theme. One last big accomplishment that I want to share and to announce is that today we are unveiling our new and improved website. So this is a snapshot of the homepage of the website, and it features, I think, a really beautiful user-friendly experience. It will provide access to our upcoming events, center news. It will feature center-related scholarship. We will have a growing archive of our videos from our past events, including today's 3 lectures will be videoed and recorded and put on the website. It will have a link to the Sub Deo podcast, which is a joint project of Professors Walsh and DiGirolamo. So there'll be an easy link there to listen to the latest podcast conversation. And also a new page, you see the right red letters at the top, Disputatio. So in the medieval university, Disputatio was the formal process of debate and discussion of arguments and ideas. And it was the art of disputing, a kind of intellectual joust, and it was meant to discover the truth, right? As Lewis put it in The Great Divorce, when he was when one of the ghosts encounters one of the ghosts is an academic, right? In fact, I think he's a minister, and he is waxing eloquently about the importance of the free winds of inquiry, and shouldn't I be free to just follow these free winds? And And the guide recalls for him that thirst is made for water, inquiry for truth, right? So that's the point of Disputatio, is to share these things, but together seeking the spirit of truth. And so Mark and I, but also others associated with the center, will post reflections about contemporary legal developments or our own scholarship or anything that catches our attention in this space, and we invite your conversation there. So there's a place on the website where you can click subscribe, and you can then be apprised of all of our activities and stay connected to us. So that's a little retrospective. So now I'd like to invite Professor DiGirolamo to come up and offer his own welcome, and then also maybe talk a little bit about the future of the center. So thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, very much. It was, as Elizabeth said, almost exactly a year ago that I was honored to speak here at the first annual Spring Symposium. And my subject at that talk was the coming of what I called a new humanism in legal education, and the great possibilities that such an approach to learning and teaching about the law might hold for a Catholic university and a Catholic law school. And I remember during the Q&A an excellent question from our Lumen Legis fellow, Professor Bill Rooney, about the relationship of the vision for education that I had laid out, the quest for knowledge and wisdom as a great unity across disciplinary variety, to the truth. Bill was usefully suggesting to me that the acquisition of knowledge is not itself the end, but rather the means through which we come to knowledge of and union with what is true. And I've remembered that good intervention over the course of the year, and it's my greatest honor and delight this year to be with you, no longer as a kind of interested and sympathetic outsider, but ab interno, as it were. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am for the wise leadership and the strategic vision of our Dean, Dean Stephen Payne, and how very happy I am to be just a small part of the project that he has initiated, as sharp and as visionary a dean as I have ever known. And that change of view has enriched my own perspective. I have adopted what legal philosophers sometimes call the internal point of view, not as to law, but as to the pursuit of truth through the knowledge of the riches, and as I and we at the center are able, the cultivation of the Catholic intellectual tradition. But before proceeding, let me say just a word about my new co-director and colleague. Our association has only just begun, but I am already so very pleased to be working with Elizabeth. This spring, she was voted and accepted a position on the tenure track of our faculty, a fact that she is too humble to raise herself, but I am not too humble to trumpet loudly and with, may God forgive me, no small degree of pride on her behalf. And as I have had occasion to observe before, in addition to many of her other high qualities, including, I'm now learning, her extremely organized mind and her meticulous eye for detail, qualities that I don't really have, she is a person of great intellectual courage. In fact, courage is the virtue with which I most closely associate Elizabeth, and it is a fact about the virtues, as Aristotle was one of the first to observe, that one learns them and one accustoms oneself to exercise them in association with others who possess them. Suffice it to say that while I am, of course, very excited to see the direction of Elizabeth's scholarship, and I am certain that she will continue to be an exceptionally fine scholar, I'm also grateful for and expect to be benefited from and by the association with someone of such steadfast bravery in her own life, professional and personal. As for the future of the center, all I can say is look out. Look out. We are coming. Elizabeth mentioned to and illustrated for you the new website and all of the intensive disputatio in which we will engage, as well as the podcast with my longtime friend, Kevin Walsh. That podcast, as we said in its very first episode, aims to give listeners a sense of what law and learning within the Catholic intellectual tradition, again, ab interno, looks like. Most law professors, I think it's fair to say, do not share that perspective. Most would not recognize it. Many might even scoff at it or denigrate it. Part of what Kevin and I aim to do is to reconstruct it for our listeners and in talking about it for ourselves. So please do listen in. It is a fact, an unfortunate one, but still a real one, that Catholic learning in the law, from the truths of the natural law tradition to the study of the relationship between law and theology, to the exploration of the association of the legal with the humanistic, it's a fact, I say, that this great inheritance has been lost to view over the decades and even the centuries of American higher education, to include American legal education. The center and the exciting projects that we have planned may not be able single-handedly to reverse the course of these intellectual streams, but we will do our level best, taking as our model or our rallying cry Isaiah chapter 42, verse 19, "Behold, I do new things, and now they shall spring forth. Verily you shall know them. I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." Even as these are dark times for higher education and the life of true learning, this center has already begun, I think, to rediscover these new waterways in the wasteland in conferences like this one and in the many activities that Elizabeth mentioned to you. But Bill's good challenge returns to my mind. What about the truth? What will come next? One effort to address it is, of course, in this very conference, where you will hear about the relationship of freedom and truth from the excellent minds of our penetrating speakers. A second future event, mark your calendars, will be a conference on October 17th and 18th in the fall, titled St. John Henry Newman, Tradition and Law. At that gathering, we will take up themes of the idea of doctrine and theology, the nature of the university and the knowledge acquired and discovered therein, and the very idea of tradition in the law and elsewhere. We are delighted to announce that the lecture will be keynoted by Professor Jennifer Newsom Martin of the University of Notre Dame's Theology Department and the incoming director of the Center for Ethics and Culture, who comes after, not to say replaces, our friend Professor Carter Sneed. The aim of that conference will be to unite lawyers, philosophers, theologians to reflect together on the concepts and categories that bind together disciplines across the universities, so that we may investigate and rediscover an ancient truth which, as St. Newman once put it, quote, "that all knowledge forms one whole because its subject matter is one. For the universe in its length and breadth is so intimately knit together that we cannot separate off portion from portion and operation from operation. The comprehension of the bearings of one science on another and the use of each to each, and the location and limitation and adjustment and due appreciation of them all, one with another, this belongs to a sort of science distinct from all of them, and which is in some sense a science of sciences," close quote. So we at the Center, following St. Newman, will pursue this science of sciences in our inquiries, and we hope and invite you to join us. We will have other offerings on other matters, on the future of marriage and the family, on the teaching and learning of law in Catholic universities and other parts of the world than the United States, on the nature of the virtues in Catholic thought, many more, but all in pursuit of this unifying science of sciences. This is how we will rediscover and cultivate the immense riches of the Catholic intellectual tradition that have endured across the centuries and still are ours today.